Great. Hello, everyone. I'd like to talk with you today about ARPA-H, a new organization that we are setting up inside of the government. So I'm curious if I could get a show of hands of how many folks are familiar with DARPA. Okay, lots of people are familiar with DARPA. So the way that DARPA works is program managers come in, they have a great new crazy idea about something that might revolutionize things in the defense and the national security space. They get the resources to test it out, and this model has worked well in that it helped create the internet and GPS and self-driving cars, the Moderna vaccine, a whole bunch of things that we use every day. So what ARPA-H is working on right now is taking that successful business model that has worked very well at DARPA and moving it over into the health sphere. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and I'd like to start out by just providing some background information on ARPA-H, how we're setting it up, where we are right now. Also, how you can get involved. There's a number of different ways that folks from this community could get involved with ARPA-H. And then I'd like to just open it up to discussion and questions. So before I dive into ARPA-H, if I can manage to move the slides. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to take a moment and just talk about career trajectories, because one of the things that I appreciated as a fellow was when we would have like these Nobel laureates that would come in and they would just like toss in all of this information about just like how to navigate your career and how they happen to like fall into this part of science and everything. And I found that to be very valuable as I was going through. So I think in terms of my career trajectory, perhaps the biggest lesson there is how to navigate across many different technical disciplines. Because you'll notice, like, I've done cybersecurity research. I'm now helping to start a health agency. I've done data and AI stuff. These things are all very, very different, right? So the question is, like, how do you navigate your career so that you can go and do a bunch of different things? Because I can tell you as a grad student, what was complicated is I could definitely never decide what I wanted to do. Everything sounded interesting and exciting, and you can probably see that in the career path. So what I did coming out of graduate school is I actually worked for a small company. I was looking for a company that just had a good environment and a very collaborative environment. So it was a small defense contractor, and I ended up on a DARPA program. And there I had worked on like network algorithms in grad school. I was able to apply that to interesting data sets. And after that, I got pulled into an additional DARPA program where effectively the next several steps, they all had this common aspect where I was looking at large data sets across many different fields. So I did big data for threat finance, a number of different interesting sensitive data sets for the Department of Defense, looked at how to use big data in order to accelerate scientific discovery in SynBio, which was the first time that I was actually doing like biology-related things, and material science, and then cyber, and kind of got into the cybersecurity thing. That turned into at some point a program manager and then a deputy director position at I2O, so Information Innovation Office at DARPA. And then I was just fortunate enough from a timing perspective that as I was leaving DARPA, folks were starting to talk about starting up ARPA-H, right? And at that point, it was honestly Tom Colio, who's in the audience someplace, who had reached out to try and identify if the government was to start an ARPA organization for health, who might be some folks that could be pulled in, right? So I got pulled into some early conversations, put together a strategy for starting an office on things related to resilience, and then got a phone call from the White House. Because effectively what they needed at that point was somebody who had DARPA experience, had some bio, also had some data experience, which not very many people had together, And they really needed somebody inside the administration that could help kind of guide some of the strategy with relation to setting up ARPA-H. So that then led to a year looking at data interoperability and pieces, and then turned into the current position as the director of the Resilient Systems Office, helping to set up this new agency. And what you'll notice is that each of those steps, there's a bit where I was bringing some type of experience that I already had to the job and exploring a new area, which was the direction that I wanted to go next, right? When I went to the White House, I had SynBio experience a little bit. I had a lot of data experience. I hadn't done healthcare, right? So then I was able to bring that DARPA experience, that like kind of data and bio to the job, and have that great exposure at the federal level, the national level, to learn more about what's happening across, say, electronic health record systems, from the national coordinator level, all across industry and everything, to better understand where are the big problems when we're looking down from the top. And at each step, you know, if you are interested in trying to navigate, think about what skills you bring to the table to figure out what type of job allows you to both take advantage of something where you're bringing that skill, and then something that's getting you a step toward where you're ultimately trying to go next. Okay. Great. ARPA-H was set up by President Biden not that long ago, and I like this quote because it talks a bit about how we're situated in the ecosystem. So ARPA-H is intended to pursue these ideas that break the mold, and they break the mold on how we normally support both fundamental research and commercial products, right? So what that says is that the space in which ARPA-H lives needs to be complementary to both what's done traditionally by NIH, right? There's a lot of very important investment in fundamental research that goes on for decades that happens at NIH. That's important and significant, and not what ARPA-H does. We want to look at the advanced research, how to get it into the field. And then there's a lot of very important investment that happens in the commercial sector and in the venture capital world. Also significant, also not where we want to be. If venture capital is already investing in it, that's not the place for ARPA-H. We instead want to identify where are the gaps that are not being covered by those other parts of the ecosystem, so that we can really jumpstart innovation in areas where there's a significant need and no one's filling it. In terms of, thank you, the mission of the agency. So ARPA-H's mission is to accelerate the improvement of health outcomes for everyone. And there's a couple different pieces to that. So the accelerate, we're very interested in advanced research in breakthrough technology, right? We want to take some type of ambitious goal about how to revolutionize the field, and instead of it taking like 10 years for us to get there, we'd like to show that it's possible to get there in 2. We want to improve health outcomes, so that means that we're not interested in purely research in the lab, rather how to get research out of the lab into some type of product or application where it's helping people in the real world. And then the for everyone means that we're not just looking at, wow, what great new technological advances will make it so that we have the best robotic surgery that's amazingly wonderful in an academic medical center. We're instead also looking at things like affordability and access. How can we make it so that those technologies are really helping the entirety of the patient population that needs them? And I must not know how to, yeah, I'm pressing arrows, and thank you. I think I'll just give up at this point. Okay, great. So there's a lot of different stakeholders in the health ecosystem. So ARPA-H is actively working to build relationships with all of these different types of players. So we have our customers. These are the patients, the clinicians, the folks that will ultimately use different technology breakthroughs coming out of ARPA-H. We also have the performer community. So these will be the folks that are doing the advanced research. So folks from academia, small businesses, large businesses, potentially hospital centers that are helping develop and test out that technology. And then we have a number of stakeholders, folks at other government organizations, our regulatory partners, partners that pay for the healthcare in the country, and we're building relationships with all of those folks so that we can both develop new tech on the healthcare side, make sure that it has the potential to really help people in the real world, and we have a pathway toward it getting to those who need it, both from a regulatory standpoint and hopefully also from an incentive and a payment type standpoint too. And thank you. So in terms of the way that ARPA-H works, again, we're using that DARPA type business model where everything in terms of the ideas, the portfolio, everything's kind of bottoms up, coming from the program managers who come to the agency with an idea of a very significant, important problem area and a revolutionary new approach for solving that problem. And the program managers have a very large amount of autonomy. So the organization's really set up for them to come in and say hey, I have this great new crazy idea that might just work. And we give them the resources to try it out to see whether it actually does. We're very interested in revolutionary change. So incremental research, that's not us. We want to say, what are the things that can really change our perception of what's possible? And where are these very important, significant places where a huge influx of investment in a short period of time can test out these ideas about a revolutionary new breakthrough technology. The program managers have a huge amount of autonomy. So in contrast to other funding organizations where perhaps the way that proposals are reviewed is very consensus-based, you're pulling in a lot of the experts in the field, which can have the effect of the kind of default assumptions of the field kind of perpetuating. The program managers at an ARPA, they can make an argument that says, okay, well, yeah, I've had 3 expert reviewers that have looked at this, but I actually disagree with them. I think that this proposal that they don't think is going to work, I think it potentially has potential. Sure, it's huge risk. There's a high likelihood it's going to fail, but I think we should try it anyway, right? So the program manager has this ability to create a risk-balanced portfolio in order to get to the end goal that they're shooting for. And they have a lot of autonomy in how they actually manage the program as they go through in order to place the investment and adjust the goals in order to get to the grand vision, or alternatively figure out that it's not working and make some recommendations about where we should be investing instead. And then importantly, all of the program managers are term limited. So folks come in with an initial 3-year term with an optional renewal up to 6 years. And that's very, very important because what it allows us to do as an organization is remain agile. So as new types of fields and disciplines emerge, we can pull in best and brightest from that new area and have folks continue to test out new ideas and bring in kind of these new emerging areas in order to focus where ARPA-H is. So the fact that our program managers are always changing is what allows us to stay current and stay up to date with what new technology and ideas and opportunity space there is for us. So in terms of the ways to interact with ARPA-H, there's a couple different ways. So first is through broad agency announcements. And there's a couple different types here. So broad agency announcement is the kind of funding solicitation for research proposals. And we have funding announcements that are around particular goal-directed programs. So we have a couple of them out right now. One of them's, for instance, on curing osteoarthritis. So making it so that you never have to have knee or hip surgery because you can just inject something that regenerates bone and cartilage. Sounds great. So that type of broad agency announcement is very detailed, right? It says, well, we need folks that can help us regenerate bone. We need to have folks that can help us regenerate cartilage. And oh, in case somebody actually gets into an accident, we need somebody who can create joints out of human cells in order to make it so that we can transplant without any type of metal or titanium in them, right? So that people can get one transplant and they never have to get a new joint, which isn't the way that things work right now. So that type of broad agency announcement is very detailed with like, these are the things that you can apply for. We also have another one, an open announcement, where it's very PI driven. So the scientists from anywhere, academia, companies, et cetera, can come and say like, hey, look, I have a great new idea. I think ARPA-H should fund it. What do you think? We have one of those on the streets right now. If you submit a 3-page abstract, we'll get feedback back to you, hopefully in a few weeks. Summer, because lots of professors have been waiting till like June to submit. We've had a real big surge, so it might be more like 6 weeks or 8 weeks as opposed to 4, but we'll do the best we can. There's really a great opportunity for folks to bring ideas to us and potentially get them funded. So happy to talk offline about that. Another way is to become or help us recruit a program manager. So long-term, where the big investment is around these breakthrough technology ideas, where you have like a program-specific broad agency announcement. So this is like I'm going to come up with a way to make cancer surgery better, or I'm going to cure osteoarthritis, right? Those types of ideas. And that's really how you get the engine of ARPA-H working. So if there's an area that you're interested in and you'd like to talk about becoming a program manager, happy to have a conversation. And if you want to do work in that area and get us to fund it, find a friend and convince them to come to ARPA-H. That's how this works. And then another way to get involved is, especially if you're on the venture capital side, we have a nationwide network that we're building in order to help assist technology from getting out of the lab and into a commercially viable path, right? So we're building a nationwide network called an Investor Catalyst one. That's in an open source selection right now, so we're anticipating an announcement in the fall where we'll have a consortium management firm and folks can join that consortium in order to be part of the ARPA-H network and receive more specific kind of project descriptions for how to help find a path toward commercialization for the emerging technology. And I guess so that I can kind of prioritize the rest of the talk, if I could get a show of hands for those of you that are in the biology space, right? Our mission's broad, improve health outcomes, many things fit. How many folks are more interested in like broad agency announcement? Hey, I want to be a principal investigator, that type of potential interaction. Okay, so we got some principal investigators. How many people want to hear more about like what's it like to be a program manager? How do I apply to be a program manager? Maybe several years from now. Okay, we got at least one. That's great. We'll talk. And then the hub and spoke network. So there's actually two. There's one on customer experience. So this is testing technology out in the real world. So think clinical trials, also testing devices in like a hospital setting or something, or the Investor Catalyst. So, okay, got it. Okay, so a little bit, that was like 3, so I'll probably spend most of my time on the other ones, but Lily, we've talked, and yes, the Investor Catalyst will have more information on the website come fall. Join the network, there'll be lots of information coming. And I keep thinking this is gonna work. Great. As I mentioned, the organization is very centered around program managers. People come in, they have a great new idea about a breakthrough technology, and effectively the program managers are coming in for those 3 to 6 years, and they're starting programs that really we should update this slide are on average 3 to 5 years long, right? So focused investment. And that shift in program managers over time helps us stay current. In terms of the folks that we're looking for, we are looking for folks that have technical honesty. We're looking for folks that are driven to try and solve a problem. So people have identified a problem area and they just really want to show that it's possible to do something different. So, kind of a lot of the same things that folks screen for inside the Hertz Foundation. And what you'll find is we'll have folks from all across, all throughout their career trajectory. So some folks will come to an ARPA at the end of their career, kind of as a capstone, because there's something that they've been wanting to do the whole way through, and it's a great place to try and get that started. And then other folks will come, especially like early in your career, if there's like an emerging tech area, right? And we'll get some very deep expertise to figure out what to do next in that field, and we'll really get folks everywhere in between. And in general, the common factor is this drive to solve the problem. In terms of how we screen for things, and this one's relevant both for the program managers and setting up the programs, applying, as well as the way that we tend to think about proposals, right? So if you are interested in putting a proposal, some of these same criteria are the type of things that we're looking for. So we want to have a very crisp definition of what problem folks are trying to solve, why it's significant, right? So not just like, I want to cure cancer because, it's cancer. But I'm trying to cure this particular type of cancer that affects such and such a number of patients and costs the healthcare system X billions of dollars, right? So a little bit more specificity. How's it done today, and what are those limitations of the state of the art? So for a program, it's kind of saying like, okay, well, here's the gap, and here's why we're not going to be able to solve this problem as it stands. Or if you're writing a proposal, you're effectively saying like, hey, look, this is what work has been done so far. Maybe it's work that your own lab has done. And you're pointing out, and here's the gap. This is why we're not able to like fully image cells in whatever we want to or whatever. And then after you've identified that gap, what's your revolutionary new approach to fill that gap and solve that problem? That's the simple part. And then after that, how are you going to measure progress? How can you tell if you're being successful, and kind of how much is it going to cost? Those types of things, and a couple important questions about kind of equity. Who's it going to affect? How is it going to help people if you're successful? So in terms of the type of process that folks go through in order to start a program, folks come in with that program idea. They will develop that broad agency announcement and then launch the program with a bunch of different performers. So a bunch of teams in order to solve that problem. And the general way of thinking about it is, unlike a company where you might say like, okay, well, here's my goal and I'm going to put like my eggs in this basket that I think is most likely to work. Instead, what will happen in a program is you'll say like, okay, well, I have this grand vision. There's probably like 3 or 4 different things that need to be solved in order to achieve this vision. And for each of those components, I can imagine, say, 3 different ways that I could solve that are all very, very different, require different capabilities, require different expertise. And effectively what the program manager is trying to do is say, like, let's try all of them at once in order to see what we learn and which ones are working when, so that we maximize our chance of hitting the end goal, right? So that's how you're developing this set of performers and ideally setting up a community so that the community is learning as you go along. And then as the performer teams, so the universities, the professors, the companies, et cetera, are progressing toward that goal, we're then measuring progress. So whenever possible, there's quantitative metrics to say, hey, are we actually making progress toward this technical goal? Sometimes metrics are an area of research in and of themselves, so those goals might shift as we learn more. But effectively, you're trying to see like what's working and what's not, and then just adapting at multiple points during the program to keep toward that long-term goal. And then assuming that the program has developed some type of technology that's useful, then you're looking for a pathway toward it surviving in the wild. And this is where we're building relationships with folks like our regulatory partners. So for instance, perhaps there's a new type of technology, but there isn't a regulatory pathway at the FDA. We'll be working with them to try and figure out, like, okay, how do you actually get this approved from a safety standpoint? Maybe there's something that needs a new type of payment model. So we're looking to build the partnerships with CMS in order to figure out what that might look like. And a lot of the program manager's job is also to think about what's that long-term trajectory, how do we get there? And we do have, again, resources, including those that we'll be pulling in through the Investor Catalyst Network, in order to be able to help folks have the technology survive in the wild. Okay, next. And then we've launched a couple programs. I've talked about this one already on curing osteoarthritis. So imagine if you never had to have a hip or a knee surgery because you were able to regenerate the bone and cartilage. And then we have another program out right now that is on making cancer surgeries more effective. So right now, if you have cancer surgery to remove a tumor, a lot of the times the whole tumor is not removed. Because either the surgeon can't tell the difference between the cancer and the surrounding tissue, right? They miss some of it. Or maybe it's too close to critical structures like a nerve or an artery, and they don't know where those structures are, so they're afraid to cut too deep. So this program looks at both of those problems and is looking at next generation imaging to make it so that cancerous surgeries can be significantly more successful than they are today. And then in terms of the types of areas where we're looking for proposals and also, hiring program managers. If you recall, our mission's quite broad. Accelerate the improvement of health outcomes for everyone. So how do we break that down? We're interested in things around health science future. So how do we expand what's technically possible? So think, what are the biomedical breakthroughs that will change our perception of how we can treat and cure disease in the next decade? And that includes things like platform technologies that are very disease agnostics, as well as things that treat some of the very well-known diseases and areas where we really don't have a health intervention today. Scalable solutions is about access and affordability. So how do we take interventions that may already exist but are only available for a fraction of the patients, either because they're at an academic medical center or they're too expensive? How do we bring down the cost? How do we explore new types of manufacturing or new types of packaging to put things in home health settings so that they can reach the patients who need the most? Proactive health, how do we expand periods of health and well-being? So think preventative medicine, so detecting when folks are starting to get sick and reversing that, as well as things like technologies to help people age in place. And then resilient systems, building a more integrated healthcare system and building systems to better help support folks' health and well-being. So this can include things like electronic health records, supply chains in order to support the medical system, things like the data systems for public health, and the socio-technical aspects. So how do the people and the technology work together? And then just a summary of different ways to work with us. So again, if you're on the venture capital side, please look for announcements of our hub and spoke network. That'll be coming in the fall. Happy to talk with folks about ideas for proposing to the Open BAA, and would love to also talk to folks who might have friends to recommend as a program manager, or might be interested in a tour at ARPA-H. It's a great way to do your public service as a Hertz Fellow. So, and then one more. So just a quote we like to end with. This present moment used to be the unimaginable future. That really speaks to where ARPA organizations live in the world. So with that, love to take some questions. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I really enjoyed your talk. My name's Neil Jablon. So as we learned, during COVID, health can be a very political issue, and you're working on the White House initiative. So obviously, there's a lot of politics. So I was wondering, in the vein of kind of career guidance for everyone, if you could say something about how you get your job done. Despite all the politics, I realize it's not all negative. A lot of the politics will actually work in your favor, but there's pluses and minuses.
That's a great question. And I think one of the things that an organization like DARPA does well is building strong ties across both sides of the aisle, right? And they and ARPA-H is very intentional about pulling in folks that have a breadth of political views, right? So that folks can talk to all people from all different political persuasions, because ultimately our funding comes from Congress, and we are accountable to the American public, right? So we look hard at whether the places that we're investing are going to help folks across the political spectrum. And then a lot of the navigating the politics also comes down to the way that, honestly, you're describing things. So one thing, if you kind of track what's going on right now, just in terms of areas that different political parties are aligning to that are related to health. On the one side, we have folks that are talking regularly about equity, right? And then on the other side, we have folks that are talking about things like access and affordability. If you think about it, equity, access, and affordability, these are really very related concepts, right? So being able to come up with language that's going to explain the goals that you're going after that appeal to multiple audiences is really part of the job, so that you can get the right things happening on the technical side and point to the types of goals that you need in a way that's going to be appealing to multiple audiences.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm over here. I just had a quick question. It seems that when you have these separate subgroups, that if their unique approach doesn't work out, might be some concerns with like contracts ending. And I wanted to know if there was something in there to address the concern that if their project doesn't work out, they have an incentive to continue their project even if it's not the one that's going to work.
Right. So how is that handled, right? And I think there's kind of a program level answer and a kind of performer level answer. So when I was a program manager, what I would look for is folks that were proposing multiple solutions to a problem, because chances were the first one wasn't going to work. And I really appreciated teams where they could diagnose that early and then come up with a whole bunch of alternate solutions. So from my perspective, as a program manager, as long as a team was being technically honest and being like, well, I tried this, I tried that, and everything, you would keep on funding for a while. And then if you're really hitting a wall, then you can start to explore, okay, well, maybe we just try and go after a different goal, right? And that's desirable. And then, kind of more at the meta scale, at the program level, you're also trying to set up the technical areas so that, maybe there's a couple where, these pieces are important and then somewhat risky, and you'll set up another technical area that's complementary so that if the first couple don't work out, you have another approach, right? Or just a completely different way of solving the problem. So there's also points where, folks are just trying something and like, we just need to admit that this isn't going to work. And then you're reinvesting that part of the portfolio, that part of the money into a different area that's working more effectively.
Hello. Really lovely talk. One theme that's come up over the course of these Hertz discussions is how developing powerful new technologies often have to compete against incumbents that have decades head start. So quantum computing has to compete against, the decades of engineering and Moore's law. Clean energy has to compete against the billions of dollars of infrastructure that the oil industry's built up. Somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but Mikhail's calcium-sensitive gas vesicles have to compete against GCAMP that's been tweaked for 15 years. So how does that shape the areas you choose to tackle, the projects you choose to fund? Like, how do you, sort of give an acknowledgement of this incumbent advantage despite wanting transformative approaches?
Yeah, that's affects our portfolio strategy, right? And where we invest. Because honestly, if it's the type of thing where a new breakthrough is just going to be picked up right away by venture capital in the commercial world because there isn't that 15-year set of infrastructure that you need to move past, then it's not our space. But a lot of the places that we invest is because there hasn't been a real change in a decade or a decade and a half. And there's evidence that there's a new possibility out there. And there's a combination of things that need to happen. One, you need to show that it's possible from a technical standpoint. And often you also need to show that it can meet those competitive metrics. And generally when you're starting, you don't know whether this is a 1-year goal where it's going to be competitive out the box, or whether it's more like a several different program, like ARPA program type goal in order to get significantly closer each time you have another shot on goal.
Thank you, Jennifer. This was right here, Lily Kim. I love this glimpse inside of the agency as it is forming, so thank you for sharing this with us. Basic question, do new program managers need to be in Washington, D.C., or can they be in other locations? And I have a not secret, but I'd like to tack on another question. Also, let's say someone has an idea for a new approach or a new something big. They want to try to test it out, but they're also interested in potentially commercializing that in the future. Is there a path to do that related to the efforts you mentioned?
Yep, 2 great questions. So. Folks can live anywhere and be a program manager. We are a hybrid organization, so we already have program managers already distributed across the country. And then in terms of the IP, what you're going to see is breadth across different ARPA programs. So I'm in the software realm. The types of differences that you would see is, on the one hand, maybe you have a program where you're very interested in developing an open source capability where everything's going to be shared and open because it's better scientifically. And then on the other side, you might be developing something where, there's a huge commercial market. We want to create the ecosystem so that we're showing that it's possible. We're pushing the boundary on those ambitious metrics. And everybody's really set up to go and commercialize that product as soon as the program's done. And you'll see, depending on the problem space and the industry, you'll see programs anywhere in between those 2 ends of the spectrum.
Hi, Jen.
Hey.
Wonderful talk. Great to see you. I had a question, Philip Welkoff. I had a question in terms of what you were talking about, a lot of the things that are learnings from DARPA and kind of bringing in that thinking. And there's been a number of efforts to have an ARPA and then some letter after that to kind of recreate the magic that is DARPA. What are some of the lessons from that you're taking from the other ARPAs in terms of how to construct ARPA-H, in terms of how to best capture that lightning in a new domain?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have folks on staff that are coming from all of the different ARPAs, which is very nice, right? So I think if we look at an organization like ARPA-E, that showed kind of how to spin things up, right? So there's a lot of folks that helped in this community who helped spin that up, right? And also, it's a very different type of commercial landscape than what's in the defense world. So I think there's been a lot of nice work to kind of adapt the business model to what makes sense in the energy sector. And what we are also doing at ARPA-H is saying, like, okay, well, we want to grab the best parts of the DARPA business model that makes sense, but then also take into account that for health, like, we are all the customers, right? Like, everybody is going to use the healthcare system at some point, and that's a very different goal than the national security goal. And especially on the transition side, that's going to look incredibly different and needs to be a very significant part of the way in which we stand up the organization. Yeah.
Hi, right here. I'm wondering, so innovation in healthcare can come both from scientific advancement, but also from changing the way we're doing things in an institutionalized way. So changing the infrastructure, changing the way we provide healthcare in the U.S. And I didn't live here in the past 12 years of my life. And I was wondering if there is any incentivization to change the sort of healthcare system or get inspired by things that are happening in other places around the world that seem to be working as well?
Definitely. Yes. And then there's a couple pieces to that, because some of it is trying to hire a program manager who can help adjust things. And I think, specifically looking at what is happening in this country, there's a lot of fee-for-service, right? We pay a lot more attention to when folks are already sick. It would be great to emphasize and have payment models that emphasize the preventative part, right? And I think that's a very big difference that we're hoping through a series of program investment over a long time period, we can really make a significant difference there.
Wonderful. And I hope we can continue many of these conversations throughout the rest of the workshop. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was tremendous.
Great.
We appreciate it.